for young people contemplating their career options, what careers have the potential to earn them the most money, and whether speech therapy is one of them. I am one of a handful of speech therapists in the entire Sub-Saharan Africa. What do I do as a speech therapist? I specialize in children or pediatrics, and I offer assessments as well as individual therapy to children who are experiencing a myriad of communication disorders. If you have a loved one who is late in talking, who has autism, who has a hearing impairment, who is stammering, has a reading disorder, I get them to communicate better. In other words, I restore people's words so that they can live to tell their own stories. So, how does speech therapy stack up in terms of earning potential? Sadly, my response to this question is often not what the young people are expecting. I usually start by asking them what it is they would happily do for nothing if nobody paid them. At this point, as you can imagine, I usually would have lost at least half of these curious souls who all they ever wanted was an inside tip on which is hands down the best career that young people should abandon all other careers for. And if I notice I'm losing pulses, I curiously ask, what problem could you solve? There, just like that, there goes the other half. But here's what I mean. How many here can say that their parents played a significant role in the careers that they chose? And how many, good? And how many parents here have at any point asked their children what problem they would like to solve when they grow up? I'd say we're doing it all wrong. If you live in Africa, you can attest to the fact that Africa does not have a shortage of problems. And Kenya most certainly is not exempt from these so-mentioned problems. Yes, some of them might be political, systemic, even leadership related, but there are also attitudinal problems which are quicker to solve. I would like to focus on something we can each do to be part of our own solutions. Imagine if you were able to solve one single problem with what you did. Your unique gifts that only you could use to serve humanity, or just one single person. Many times we get bogged down by the bigness of things, including the problems that we are faced with, that not acting seems like the less intimidating option to take. But what if you too saw yourself as aptly qualified to join in the problem solving in your own way, of whichever circumstances you find yourself in, instead of merely spectating and eventually becoming disillusioned by the lack of action? What if I told you there's more than one way you can become an active problem solver in your own life? Because the problems that face us as a society in one way or the other affect us at a personal level. One way you can become an active problem solver is through your career. Yes, what you do in your 9 to 5. If no one ever told you, your career should be your contribution to society. Your career ought to be a marriage between what you're passionate about and what you can gain further skills in order to be truly exceptional at what you do. How many here are in their preferred careers? Excellent. Are you serving your highest calling through what you do every day at work? The fact of the matter is, if you're not in a career that fulfills you, that has you jumping out of bed each morning with renewed zeal, and you find yourself wishing you had the courage to do this other thing if you are assured you wouldn't fail, then the world has not experienced what your unique contribution, a problem only your skill set together with your passion can solve with immeasurable zeal. And as a result, one problem facing us remains unsolved. I remember when I made the decision to abandon all the conveniences I'd grown accustomed to living overseas and return to Kenya and figure out how I could be of some use to my country. I was met with a sea of problems, like most returnees often are. But here's the thing, you may not immediately be able to do anything or solve the food crisis situation in parts of our country, or the overflooding, or the sewerage issues. But you may be able to, for example, do something about bringing quality butchering skills, yes, butchering skills, to foodies like me, who wish they could only get a certain cut of meat, a porterhouse steak or a Scotch fillet to prepare for themselves at home. Or you may be able to figure out perhaps a garbage collection solution for your suburb, which utilizes consistent and reliable garbage trucks, which don't pollute the air and which don't break down at every stop, including in front of my house. Not once, but a total of 3 times, and effectively putting me under house arrest. And that's exactly what the youth in Dandora did in their immediate environments, and in the process created jobs for themselves. I like what Winston Churchill said, the pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, while the optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. Another way we can be part of the solution and not the problem is if we implement this tiny tweak in how we engage our children on matters career. What if, instead of asking your children what it is they'd like to be when they grow up, you ask them instead, what problem would you like to solve when you grow up? As parents, we can help our children make connections between what they show a persistent interest in and how that could be used to solve a common problem witnessed. Youth unemployment in Africa is at crisis proportions. The rate of unemployment among the youth in Kenya alone is almost 40%. And one startling fact is that almost half of the entire African population is below the age of 25 years. And about 75% is under or below the age of 35 years. That's 650 million people in Africa who are under the age of 25 years. For a good 3 years, whenever I would ask my daughter what it is she'd like to be when she grows up, and that was before I had my paradigm shift, she would, without missing a beat, say that she'd like to be a rock climber. I was a little confused. Sweetie, how wonderful. So do you want to teach people how to put on their harnesses, or you want to teach them how to rock climb, right, sweetie? And not just rock climb, just rock climb. I fail to see what anyone could possibly do with a career in just rock climbing. But not wanting to risk being the obstacle between our daughter's dream career, we decided to take her rock climbing a few times. Well, actually more like a lot of times. So that she could quench that thirst, or however way you want to look at it. I remember my husband would stand by the sidelines and ever so supportingly urge her to try all the climbs that were available. Come on, sweetie, you can do it. Several rock climbing sessions later, consecutive ones I might add, our daughter decided she was no longer interested in becoming a rock climber, or at least not as a career. The last time I checked, she wanted to be a builder and an artist and a pianist and a tennis player. Yesterday when I was rehearsing my speech, she said she wants to be a rock climber. Then she said, no, actually I've changed my mind, I want to be a rollerblader. So maybe I need to have more conversations with her. But anything that she claims she wants to be in our household nowadays is often preceded with the question, what problem would this career solve for humanity? My daughter's 8, by the way. Probably more lessons than one, right? Yeah. Well, it is easy for us as parents to discredit our children's imaginative minds and prematurely shape their thoughts into conforming into our own narrow outlook. Just because your minds cannot fathom the perceived usefulness of less mainstream career interests, for example, doesn't mean that there is no value in them. For example, who would have thought a social media marketer, a person that changes profile on Instagram and Facebook, would be a highly sought after career in 2019. I believe our children should not live our unfulfilled dreams, and they should not base their decision on which careers to choose based on how much a job will pay. And they should most certainly not base that decision or chase after careers that supposedly lift up the family name. Instead, we should mentor our children to figure out what brings them joy and what they feel truly passionate about, and pair that with what problem they wish to solve and make that their career. Because careers can be created through an altered perspective. Take me, for instance. I never knew there was such a career as speech therapy until my parents were faced with the need for my younger sister to be seen by one. Watching my parents feeling hopeless about not being able to find a speech therapist in the city that we lived in, that did something to start this fire in my belly about preserving human dignity and figuring out how no child would go through life without optimizing on their potential. I had just finished high school at the time, and my fate of what I was going to do in college was dependent on some people deciding which course I was going to be called to do. I mean, how do you impose a career on a person? Should it not be informed by their interests and their passions? I speak a lot about passions today. Speech therapy for me was a marriage between my deep love for children and a problem. A single problem which affected me at a personal level and which I truly felt called to solve. And that became the driving force behind my choice of career, and it has since unfolded into many wonderful happenings. I can say for one that speech therapy is now a much more widely accessible service in Kenya, and is far more accessible than it was 20 years ago. And this means for families that have persons that have a communication disorder, they can now see their loved ones improve their communication abilities and not have to contend with a life of missed opportunities or diminished quality of life as a result of their impairment. Second, speech therapy, I can say, is a much more recognized career or service in this country, and hopefully a new career option for young people exploring fitting careers. When you align your inner purpose of service or being fully present in whatever you're doing with your outer purpose, sharing your unique gifts with those around you, you easily find success and fulfillment. When your resolve to solve a problem is heightened, you somehow master single-minded focus and you stay true to your cause. You weather very many storms and you stay, in your path. Because when you're solving a problem, you don't stop when you encounter a problem or an obstacle. You don't give up, you don't settle. You realize that every problem along the way becomes your inspiration to find a solution. And boy, don't those problems come at you hard and fast? And that is really what informed my paradigm shift. After receiving more than my fair share of problems as an entrepreneur in a developing country, I found myself always complaining about this not working, that not working, expecting somebody to come and solve those problems for me. And quite frankly, that just took away the power from me. I thought to myself, what if I changed my perspective and I started to view these problems, and not just problems, but opportunities for me to actually go in and do something. Not just for my sake, but the sake of other people that are complaining about the same things. And just like that, I got my power back. And you have no idea how this little shift in perspective did to my overall mindset, and not to mention my happiness levels. My challenge to you, next time you find yourself complaining like I was, feeling exasperated by whatever situation or thing that isn't going right, perhaps consider yourself or give yourself permission to be the person that is going to solve that problem. Not just for yourself, but for our benefit as well. Remember though, trying to solve a big problem can often feel daunting. But solving one small problem might just well be the venture that enriches your experience and equips you with the tools to be able to solve a slightly bigger problem next time. I really believe that we each have a responsibility. We each have a social responsibility to being part of the solutions to the many problems that our country is faced with. Let us endeavor to adopt a changed mindset, not just about how we choose our own careers, but how we nurture and mentor the youth and the children to shift their mindset so that every career becomes viable and sacred. Next time you find yourself speaking on the subject of careers with your children, ask them, what problem would you like to solve when you grow up? And I'll ask you the same question. What problem are you solving through your career? Back to that question I'm often asked by young people about which careers have the potential to earn you the most money and whether speech therapy is one of them. The truth is, anything you do wholeheartedly with joy, that brought you joy and satisfaction, that has the potential to find you success. And yes, even pay you sufficiently. Is speech therapy one of those careers? For the right person, absolutely. For the wrong person, no.